Good evening. I would like to call this Brunswick City Commission meeting to order on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. Let us all stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Bow heads, please. Most heavenly and gracious Father, we thank you now for this opportunity to stand before you. We thank you for these, your people that had gathered together. God, we thank you now that you have brought us on one accord. We pray now, God, for the mindsets of this room, God. We pray now, God, that you will bless and touch this Dios, God, that we will make the decisions that are for the betterment for the entirety of the city of Brunswick and also for the county of Glenn as they are included in these decisions, Father God. So we thank you now and we bless this opportunity to come before you, to sup with you. We give you honor and praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Do we have any addendums to the agenda?
I'll make a motion to defer item number 8, consider adoption of proposed ordinance number 1075, urban camping until October 5th, 2022 commission meeting.
Second.
Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, that motion passes.
I'd like to make a second motion to add as item number 4A, update on wayfinding signage installation.
Hearing the first, do we have a second?
Second.
Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion also passes. Now we will open it up for a motion to adopt the regular scheduled meeting agenda as amended.
So moved.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. The motion passes. The agenda is adopted. We will now move on to Ms. Brown, the public hearing for new alcohol and beverage license. Lotto Mart 341 LLC, manager, Mr. Patel. The business address is 2432 Newcastle Street. The permit type is retail sale of beer and wine.
Good evening. Lotto Mart 341 was deferred at the last commission on September 7th, pending attendance for MPA. I did get word that they did attend on September 12th, and they are back here today for approval from commission.
Thank you so much. Do we have Mr. Patel with us?
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
So yes, as planned, we had attend the meeting of NPA on the 12th at 6 o'clock in the evening. And we went ahead and discussed there, what are your plans in order for you to open a new business with the alcohol and retail sales beer and alcohol. And we told them what were our plan to bring all the groceries, like any requirements that the neighborhood needs, and also we're also planning to put like all the fishing items, which is docks is nearby, so that way people will come out and buy all the fishing items and everything. And I believe I forgot his name, but he was pretty flattened by the plans that we put out in front of him, and I don't think he had any agendas against us.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Now, are you Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Okay. And you will be you are the person applying for this. You are the manager.
He is actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, just as a general question, is there any other alcohol selling entities, whether it be loosely connected or directly connected, by LLC, by family, anything to that
No, sir.
nature?
Not at all.
Okay, so all of your LLCs are completely separated?
Yes,
Okay. And those LLCs don't operate under any type of umbrella
sir.
business? They're all individually managed?
yes,
Okay. Are they all individually managed out of the same family by chance?
yes, same family as a connection,
Okay,
but they,
different LLCs?
yes,
Yes. And if you don't mind me asking, for those who would be, I guess, I would say in the, how many businesses do you all own kind of as a family?
3.
3? Have any of those businesses that are in the umbrella of kind of the family, not a singular LLC, I understand that, but any of the other ones that are kind of under that family of businesses, have they had any issues with underage sales, security issues, any problems?
Never
to
at all,
that nature?
never at all.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have for now.
I want to piggyback on what the mayor just asked. He was asking about the LLCs, and you indicated that they are separate entities.
Yes,
Understanding that they may be separate entities, but are there like members?
no, we're
None of these LLCs have the same members.
no,
You sure?
not at all. Yes, positive.
So each LLC has its own separate members
Members.
attached to that LLC?
Yes,
Okay. There are not any general members,
not at all.
so they're sole entities,
So entities,
not,
so LLCs.
not multi-membered LLCs.
Nope. Not at all.
Okay.
Are you asking in any of the other stores in the family having underage?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah, one of them were.
Okay,
Well-
and none of these members, that's a different LLC.
Yes, it is.
And none of these members are the same members that carry throughout all of these LLCs.
So this particular one here, this is I'm not sure if he's gonna be in there.
Yeah,
LLC.
yeah.
Okay, he's saying he's different from,
Yeah,
yeah, and this is the owner of lot,
a lot of
but he's here in person to just speak.
Okay, all right, so we understand management and ownership. So we're still getting to the entity makeup of these LLCs, these limited liability companies.
They're not allied to each other.
They're
all
not aligned with each other.
They're all separate. They're all separate LLCs,
Okay.
and each LLCs have their individual owners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you,
The owners don't necessarily have to be members now,
Yes, I understand.
or the members don't necessarily have
Have
to
to
be
be owners. Yeah,
managing
managed.
owners.
They're not.
do you all, I'm assuming, is this your first foray into this type of
Yes.
business? And so I would be assuming you're learning a lot from those
Yes.
who
Here's,
have been in the business thus far. In that scenario, can you tell me a little bit about the management style that you all would be building, being that you've had, I guess, a citation
Right.
here recently for underage sales?
so basically, he's planning to work by himself at this location. And the way we have taught him how to do it is basically like any minors or any underage person comes to buy a tobacco product or any alcohol product, he should check their IDs and make sure he bring it up in the system, so that way he knows that he doesn't get in trouble in order for him to selling any underage person, even if it is a tobacco product or an alcohol product.
And the store that was in the family of companies that was ticketed for
Right.
underage sales, was it underage sales of tobacco products or underage sale
Alcohol.
of alcohol?
Yes,
Okay. Where is that located?
it's on First Avenue.
First Avenue. Is the other store that you all own inside of the city of Brunswick?
Yes,
Um,
so First and Parkwood.
That'd be First and Parkwood.
It's 1001 First Avenue.
I think it's at O. Well, that's,
O.
oh, wait a minute. The one at First Avenue is probably
should
near
be.
the old hospital.
It's in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
It's in the neighborhood.
It's the old
South
Jack
End.
Country Mall.
yeah,
That one.
Okay.
sorry.
Inside of you all's
Okay, street.
management changes or kind of different ways of doing things after being cited for underage sales, what kind of changes did you all make at that store to ensure that it doesn't happen again?
So basically the person who sold it was like thinking he looked, when I spoke to him, when he got cited on the site, so basically I asked him, what was you doing? So he was saying like the person who came as a, I would say, like to check on it, like whether we were selling it underage or not. He's saying, he basically said like he pretty much looked old enough to buy the product, and that's why he didn't ID him. And so I told him, no, that's not how you're supposed to run the register. When you're behind the counter, it doesn't matter whoever comes in or out. As many times as it come in or out, you're supposed to ID him if they're buying a tobacco or alcohol products.
And how long have you all had these groups of businesses in Brunswick? How long have you operated?
A little over 9 years,
A little over 9 years.
and this is my first citation that we ever had.
At your two locations,
One location.
the one location. Okay. The other location have any citations?
No, sir.
Those are all the questions I have.
What's the store hours at this one?
This one?
Mhm.
Oh, the Fine Lotto Mart, it'll be 8 to 12,
8 to 4.
8 to 12, 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Yeah.
Is there any other information that you have? Is there any other information that you have?
How do we know what the results were from the NPA meeting?
It's my understanding that, Pastor Dickerson, and a couple of others weren't for it, but I understand there were other people also at the meeting that attended. I wasn't present for it, but I just got the information from, Pastor Dickerson. That I know that some of the people were for it, some of the people weren't. I'm not sure who lived in, who actually lived there. Because there were some other parties that brought other people in. So I'm not sure if those persons were actually from that community or not. So I don't know other than that. But I know Pastor Dickerson, who's the head of the NPA, he wasn't in favor of it. He and a couple other people were in favor of it. So I don't know besides that.
Right.
He wish they were. Majority of them were not. But the people that were there, they voted and yes, not waking up.
Okay.
But again, as he spoke at the podium, he was unable to give that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
Thank you. This may be an off question. Do you guys have any idea how far or close you all are to another establishment that sells beer and wine?
Right now, I don't have any plans to open up any new location, but this is where we are helping, trying to, build him to get his own business, and that's all about it right now.
I guess I was trying to say, this location, 2432 Newcastle Street,
Right.
do you all know how close or how far this location is from any other location that's probably selling beer and wine?
I would say 1.5 miles.
I look up. going
There is
south-
one,
going
there is
south.
one on right, one on left, and there is some on Norwich as well.
Mhm.
Of course, they're right on the waterfront, right across from the marine.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Any additional questions? Hearing none, we will open it for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the
Do we need a public
license for.
Sorry,
Public-
sorry,
public-
sorry about that.
Here.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry.
We will now open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I think we'll move to the
Yeah.
motion.
I will be happy to make a motion to approve the license for retail sale of beer and wine at Lotto Mart 341,
Hearing a,
2432 Newcastle Street.
hearing a first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Patel.
you.
Thank you.
Thank-
Next up, we will have a presentation from Hercules regarding remediation goals. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mark Johnson. I'm here with Greg Roush. And appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. Before I dive in, I know y'all get complaints all the time, but I just want to commend you for however y'all coordinated with Georgia DOT on Gloucester Street. I've been driving that street for almost 30 years, 5 times a week, and that was the most pleasant drive I've ever had on it. So thank you all for that. But
Well, hopefully when it's done,
Right.
everybody will truly figure it out.
it
The lane switching and,
didn't take too long.
yeah.
But y'all did a great job, so thank you. But moving on to the agenda item, I'm pleased to be here tonight on behalf of Hercules and for Greg to be here with me to kind of give you all the details. And Hercules has made a real commitment to try to at least annually, if not more often, come before the community and just tell folks about the work that's going on out there. And this is part of that effort. We want people to know what's been happening, the work that's been going on. And I'll say, there are no magic potions or magic bullets to make this happen faster. It's hard work. There's a lot of science involved. You have to work with EPD and EPA, but even with all that, for the past year or so, these guys really got out there and made a lot of progress. And this is by no means the end of the road on that. I mean, it's just continuing work that's happened in the past. But I would say at an accelerated pace. And the hope is that will continue. I think it's the EPD and really come up with a great approach to this type of work where it allows people to get out and actually do the work. Because one of the biggest complaints I hear is, well, what's happening? And I can say with a great deal of confidence that this work is going on. It's good work. It makes the Pinova plant site safer, and it's going to be safer for employees. It's safer for the community. It's just safer for the city at large. So I think it's a positive report. And again, by no stretch of imagination is it the end of the road. I mean, this work's going to continue, but tonight's report, I hope, will be received as a positive report. It's probably too technical. We try to boil it down and make it as understandable as we can. But if y'all have any questions, ask Greg, don't ask me. So, but with that, I'll turn it over to Greg. It's Greg Roush is with Geosyntec. He's been doing this kind of work for 35 years. So he knows what he's doing. And we do have a short PowerPoint, and we promised Ms. McDuffie we would keep it moving. So thank you all.
Well, thanks, Mark. And thanks for having us tonight. And we did meet about a year and a half ago. Unfortunately, it was a virtual meeting, not an in-person meeting because of COVID. And at that time, we presented Hercules' proposed corrective action plan. It went out for public comment. And the way the process works is that plan goes out for comment. EPD receives public comments. EPD generates their own comments. The plan then is revised to incorporate those comments. EPD has accepted that corrective action plan, and it is now out for public comment with their intent to incorporate that corrective action plan into that facility's hazardous waste permit. So that's where we are today. We'll go over kind of the high level content of the corrective action plan, a little bit on the history of the site, high level in the corrective action plan, talk about some of the ongoing corrective actions that we're doing that Mark alluded to. And then we'll talk about next steps for the plant site and just a little bit on the public comment period and stakeholder meeting. So this is the plant site over here. It's a big site. It's one facility, but there are two property owners. Pinova owns the central part of the site where the manufacturing operations are ongoing. Hercules owns the northern part of that facility, and then the part that's east of Highway 17, which is the main corridor there on the right hand side. And that's referred to as the Marshwood storage yard. The plant's been there a long time. You guys are aware of that since the 1920s. It operated for a long time before there were any environmental regulations. You know, using industrial practices that were common for the day, but you know, decades later, what we've discovered is those industrial practices led to the release of chemicals in the soil and groundwater. So this corrective action plan then is to address those legacy or historic releases from the you know, from decades ago.
Greg, where is Ashland Oil now in the chain of things?
I'm sorry.
Ashland Oil, where are they now?
Ashland Oil.
Yeah.
Ashland Hercules LLC is a subsidiary of Ashland Chemical. Yep.
Thank you.
This figure shows, before I get to it, herculesbrunswick.com. We have a website, plant history of corrective actions, a lot of documents that we've submitted and EPD's approved on that website, including the corrective action plan. So I encourage you to go take a look at that. A lot of corrective actions have been done at the site. You know, that green area in the north, it looks like an airplane. That was done back in the 80s, where the sediment out of those wastewater ponds were excavated and shipped off site. And kind of in the middle, when in the 1990s, a groundwater treatment system was installed. In the early 2000s, Hercules excavated like 50,000 tons of soil and shipped it off site. So a lot has been done. It's been a continuous process, and I'll give some highlights of some of the ongoing corrective actions a little bit later in the presentation. So as I mentioned, EPD, you know, issued a public notice. They plan to incorporate the corrective action plan into the permit. That plan, you know, kind of sets the roadmap for the site going forward. It describes, you know, where the contamination is, the ongoing corrective actions, tools to clean up the contamination, these legacy releases, additional actions that we plan to implement to inform future corrective action. And most importantly, it presents an adaptive approach. And so that little diagram on the right, kind of in simplistic terms, an adaptive approach is a little bit of an iterative process where you know, we implement a corrective action, we monitor it, we tweak it, we adjust it to make sure it's operating as designed. And then while we're doing that, we're investigating still on the plant site to look for other areas where corrective actions may be necessary. So that's a little bit of a unique approach, but it's focused, you know, it's results oriented, it's based on good science, and it pushes the site forward. Next slide. So since we met last, we've accomplished a lot. We completed remediation of soils in this Toxin tank farm area. We've completed site-wide delineation and gotten submitted an interim corrective measures plan, which is I'll refer to as an ICM plan for site-wide soils. EPD hasn't approved that plan yet, but we think they'll approve it very soon. And so we're in the process of procuring contractors to implement that plan. We got approval of an ICM plan and implemented some in situ chemical oxidation to treat a source area in the middle of the plant. That's been implemented. We prepared an ICM plan and got approval from EPD to implement some groundwater remedies in a deeper zone of the aquifer system out there using bioremediation technologies. Two different plans there. One of those we've implemented. The other one, we're procuring contractors to implement it. So it's a lot of good stuff. If you go to the next slide. We've also submitted to EPA and EPD a plan to assess the marsh yard, which is that area that's east of Highway 17, to assess the soil in an effort to get that property ready for reuse and redevelopment. So we're excited about that. And then finally, there are 5 residential water supply wells on Terry Creek Road. We've sampled those wells for 5 years or so. None of them are impacted by any of the plant operations. We investigated the depths of the wells. We could measure some of them. Other ones we used like a geochemical analysis to understand the depths of the wells and what aquifer is drawing water from. There were 2 wells. 3 of the wells were definitely in the Floridian aquifer, which is really deep. It's where the city gets their water from. 2 of the wells we thought were in the Brunswick aquifer, so a little shallower, but just to eliminate any concern about the depths of those wells, Hercules voluntarily abandoned the existing wells and installed 2 new deep wells in the Floridian aquifer for those two residences. Next slide. So I'll go through these fast. If you would just go to the next one. We did completed soil remediation in the Toxin tank farm. It's kind of that blue rectangular area in the middle. We treated 7,500 cubic yards of soil. Down to the south of that, we excavated some of that soil and put it in that tank farm area and remediated it at the same time. That kind of shaded area on the right was previously remediated. That work was done from May to December of last year, so it's completed. If you go to the next slide, the picture on the left will be, some construction work that they did at the site, and the picture on the right is kind of what it looks like when we were done. So you can see it's grassed and ready for reuse by the plant. For whatever needs they may have. If you go to the next slide. On site-wide soils, I presented this one last time. So, over 4,000 samples have been collected and analyzed at the site. So there's a pretty good understanding of where things are. Each one of those little dots on that map is a soil sample that was collected and shipped off to the laboratory for analysis. So if you go to the next slide. So based on that data set, there were 6 additional areas that are proposed for excavation based on the levels of toxaphene in soil. They exceeded the removal management level provided by EPA and EPD. So we plan to excavate that soil and ship it off-site. And hopefully we'll get to that fourth quarter once EPD approves the plan.
Greg, what is to the far right? That looks.
That's the
sculpted?
Marshwood storage yard. You mean off the screen?
No, it's to the west of, I think, 17.
Those are stump piles. They use, I might have skipped over that. They use pine stumps as the
Right.
raw material at
Right.
the plant. And so those are just big,
So they're
humongous,
piles. 'Cause it
humongous
looks
piles of
like
pine
it's
stumps.
dug out.
And yeah, no, they're piles and they extract the resin out of those and
Right.
make products out of
Okay.
it.
So what's the amount of oil that's to be excavated and from those different areas?
The soil,
Uh-huh.
I don't remember the exact volume, but I'm going to say it's in the 2,000 cubic yard range. If you go to the next slide, so that's kind of what we've done on soil. So it was a lot, treating the toxin tank farm soils was a big project. And once we get these other soils out, we'll reduce, any potential risk to site workers significantly. Moving on to groundwater, just to give you a little background on the groundwater, and you guys live here and you probably know it. The site, Brunswick area is underlain by multiple aquifer systems. There's the superficial aquifer, then there's the Brunswick aquifer, which there's actually two of those, and then there's the Floridian aquifer. So what we're dealing with is the upper superficial aquifer. And that aquifer is divided into an upper and a lower superficial aquifer. And the contamination we're dealing with is in the upper part of that superficial aquifer. So it goes down to about 100 feet. So the little diagram on the right, that upper superficial aquifer is divided into a shallow, intermediate, and deep zone. And the deep zone is like 80 to 100 feet deep. And that's where most of the contamination at the plant site is. On the plant site, where there's contamination, rainwater will percolate through that contamination. It percolates to shallow groundwater, and then the groundwater moves vertically and into that deeper zone, and then it migrates laterally. So on the plant site, there's some shallow groundwater contamination, but like at the boundaries, it's in the deep zone.
So how far out? I know you said you gave the depth, but how far in width is it stretching out?
I have some figures. I can
okay.
show you that. I can point to it. I don't have it actually delineated on the figure, but if you go to the next slide.
So does it migrate more horizontally or vertically?
Horizontal.
Okay.
So this is one of the source areas. We're treating shallow groundwater. It's in the middle of the plant site. You can see the little inset over there box. So you can see it's right in the middle of the plant. This is an area that we targeted for remediation, after some technology reviews, some treatability studies. In situ chemical oxidation was the selected technology. It's where you inject an oxidant into the subsurface and it chemically destroys the contaminants in place. There's a lot of utilities around that area, so we're kind of doing an inside out approach. Those blue dots on there are injection wells where we inject the oxidant. If you go to the next slide, EPD approved this plan. We did the injections in January of this year. We sampled the wells. There's performance monitoring wells we have to install to monitor the performance. We sampled those in April. We had about a 50% reduction in concentration. We did a second injection in June, and we just now have resampled those wells to see what kind of the effectiveness of that second injection. This is just a picture. Those white vertical little tanks there are tanks with the oxidant in it, and they're just gravity feeding the oxidant into the wells that are right adjacent to the tanks. So if you go to the next slide.
Okay, I'm gonna finish off with another question I had. The initial one, when I said, what was the horizontal or the width of the traveling of the contamination? So my second part of that is, at what rate is the contamination traveling out?
Right. So when I get to a slide, I'll address both of those questions.
Okay.
I'll need to point to stuff.
Okay.
So in the deep zone, remember, this is in the 80 to 100 foot depth range. Again, after technology review and some treatability studies in the lab, bioremediation was selected as the remedy technology for that. It uses bacteria to degrade and permanently destroy the contaminant. It transforms it into like carbon dioxide and water. And that's implemented by installing, rows of closely spaced wells. And then you inject the amendments into those wells, and it creates like a wall in the subsurface, so that as groundwater flows through that wall, it is treated and cleaner coming out the other side. So the next slide shows a diagram, concept diagram of that on the next slide. Thank you. It hadn't moved yet. Oh, there we go. So this is just kind of up one more, go back one, sorry. This will just show the concept of it. The red polygon there on the left is like the groundwater plume. The green block is like the reactive zone of that biobarrier wall that's created by those rows of injection wells. And then as groundwater comes out the other side, it's cleaner than it is on the upstream side. So that's just kind of the concept of what we're implementing out there. If you go to the next one now. So we've, in the southeast corner of the property, you can see the inset box where we've installed this. We've actually installed kind of staggered wells, 2 rows of staggered injection wells. And they're at 2 different depths. We installed those and it took us 6 weeks to install them. So January, February, we took baseline measurements in like March, April, and we did the injections in May. So that's completed. We just, again, sampled the performance monitoring wells to evaluate, the effectiveness of that system. So to your question, dang, that was right where I needed to be. So groundwater moves at different rates across the site. If it'll be easier if I just point. On the west side of 17, it's moving like 40 to 50 feet a year. That's groundwater movement. Contaminant moves slower than that, but generally you can think of it 40 feet per year. So not real fast. East of Highway 17, and what drives that is the grade, which is slow, the water table. East of 17, because we're close to the marsh, that grade flattens out. The groundwater is only moving 5 years, it's not moving that fast.
Is it affected by tidal?
It is.
Okay.
So is it like going, because I'm still picturing in my mind when you're saying the horizontal versus the vertical.
Right.
So is it traveling down and around, or is it just going directly horizontal?
No, it's going down and then horizontal.
Okay.
And the reason for that is, it's just rainfall precipitation. A lot of the plant's covered with buildings, so there's no infiltration, right? In the open areas of the plant where we're actually doing that chemical oxidation work, for example, that's just gravel. So rainwater, percolates in and creates a mound, right? That then creates that slope. And so that's why it's, moving a little faster, and that gradient is downward because of that mounding from precipitation.
And so I know it's being treated with the injections, but is there some other type of physical barrier that's able to be implemented, or is it not? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, you're talking, we've installed those before,
Okay.
like slurry walls and things. It's really difficult to install them in that 80 to 100 foot depth range. It can be done. The problem here is there are like 1 million utilities that cross. I don't have the utility map up here, but there's probably 10 utilities. It was difficult just to get 8-inch diameter boreholes in this area.
Yeah.
So things like that preclude, putting like a slurry wall in, which is kind of what you're talking about.
Okay.
When you do that, the water will mound up behind it, and then you got to
You
pump
still
it
gotta
out and
pump,
treat it and
okay.
do all that kind of stuff. So it's treating contaminants in place is really the best way to go, because you've got no waste to deal with when you're done.
Oh.
Right, it just treats it in place. So that's what we're doing there. And one more slide.
What about the plumes that are traveling underground on the east side of 17?
So this is an adaptive approach. We want to get something done. We're treating the source area. We're cutting the contamination off from flowing, further off site. Dealing with the stuff that's on the other side of the wall, we still have to address. we're not addressing that yet with this plan. I will say, it's tough to treat every molecule that's out there. It's impossible to do that. And every aquifer has an assimilative capacity, its capacity to like recover itself. It's done by indigenous microorganisms that degrade the contaminants. The contaminant mass thins, it dilutes out, it absorbs onto the aquifer matrix or clay particles. So what we want to do is shut the flow of the contamination off. And we still need to evaluate this, but natural attenuation will have to be part of the remedy at some point, because you just can't treat every molecule. The system itself will treat itself. So that's something we'll have to look at about what's already on the other side of the wall. But like I said, it's an adaptive approach. We got to get something done now. And so that's why we're doing what we're doing. And we'll monitor it, tweak it. We still need to look at the attenuation approach for what's already on the other side of the wall.
You're at the source and you're trying to keep it from.
Right.
Spreading.
Right. So if you cut that source off, the plume will stop spreading, right? Because so that's what we're trying to do, basically. We want that plume to stabilize and then start shrinking. And it will do that the aquifer will do that on its own, as long as the mass loading, the contaminant flow gets lowered, right? Because every aquifer has a assimilative capacity or ability to restore itself. You just can't overload it. And so we're trying to knock that mass down so that the aquifer can do that itself. I didn't answer your other question. Well, I'll do this one. So the anaerobic wall that we just talked about. So there's two different types of walls, bioremediation. One is bacteria that thrives in the absence of oxygen. And so this is the one that we just talked about in the southeast corner. So this is picture on the left is them installing injection wells. The picture on the right is, the contractor injecting the amendments into those injection wells. So I would say too, these bacteria are naturally occurring. Sometimes they just need to get kick-started by injecting amendments. Sometimes you need to just bio-augment them to get enough biomass to do what you want them to do. And so with this one, we're augmenting it a little bit with some additional bacteria. And giving it some other food, basically, to make the bacteria grow, which will then consume the contamination. So if you go to the next slide. So on the northeast corner, and you can see in the inset box where we're installing this, this is the one that we'll install the wells probably in December, maybe earlier. But the system is being fabricated and it will be installed next year. This one is an aerobic system. So it's two different contaminants. This contaminant is benzene, and it degrades preferentially aerobically, which is in the presence, bacteria in the presence of oxygen. So with this system, we're going to drill injection wells and inject air into the formation. That air contains oxygen, which then promotes degradation in the subsurface. And so if you go back one, your question on the delineated the plume is about right here. This one, there is a well on this corner here that does have benzene in it. So we can't really get out any more to install another well. So we have not eliminated that portion of the benzene plume.
So you said something about your future plans are to develop that area, the east side. So what's
So what obviously we're not going to develop it, but we're going to assess the soils, make sure there's no contamination in the soils. If there is, we'll dig it up and get it ready for redevelopment. So that piece of the property is actually, it's part of the RECRA facility. And it's also part of the Superfund site. So I've got to get it cleared through both entities
Mhm.
have to give it a blessing to say it's ready for reuse.
Yeah.
Then another developer would come in and develop it.
Okay.
We're just getting it ready for redevelopment by getting letters from EPA and EPD, the
Mhm.
comfort letters or, a ready for reuse letter.
What's a prospective development? Commercial, of
Uh,
course, commercial, of course.
I don't know.
Probably can't say exactly.
Oh,
right
okay.
now. Sure you have really active, positive discussions to return that as a very positive development for the city and the community, so.
Is that private property on the east side? That's what I
It's
thought.
owned
So
by
it's not-
Hercules.
It's not, it is owned by Hercules.
That part is solely owned by Hercules.
Okay.
Every time I've checked on it, Greg, they told me it belonged to Ashland. And that if you want to find out something about it, you talk to Ashland. I never pursued it after that, but I did for a while.
Yeah.
Titles in Hercules.
Is it?
Yeah, it's still Hercules LLC.
Maybe I've is there such thing as a runaround?
Sounds like it, John.
I think, I forgot the exact, history of that. Hercules bought Ashland, other way around, vice versa. Ashland bought Hercules, but they still keep the Hercules name for these legacy sites because Ashland doesn't, it's not their contamination. It was Hercules.
They don't want their name attached. to it. Yeah.
That's so,
not in-
I guess.
Not
I tell
publicly
you,
anyway.
in the old days over there, you've probably seen pictures of the stumps that were stored over there.
Mhm.
It was unbelievable. And what I remember about those things the most is how often lightning struck them. And
They had a fire suppression system on that side.
well, they did after a while, but I'll tell you, back in the old days, they burned and they emitted the smoke you would not believe what
Really?
all that was. And it was
Yeah.
unbelievable. You
Yeah.
could see it all over Brunswick, but
Wow.
I have a question
it
about
was
that.
unreal.
So you told us about what's happening under the dirt. But it's like one day I noticed, and I got calls from other people, that the smoke coming out of the smokestack had decidedly become a much darker emission. It wasn't this sort of steam that dissipated quickly and it's
Right.
more billowy white. It was decidedly grayer, darker, and traveled farther.
Yeah, so I'm working for Hercules. That's a Pinova question and I know generally it's.
So you're gonna shuffle it off.
Well, I don't know the answer to that. It's mostly steam I know that's
Yeah.
coming out of there. So I can't really speak
Okay.
to discoloration.
Is that something you can check on?
Certainly, I'll
Okay.
follow up with.
Because I've had several, I don't know if any of the other commissioners have had people contact them, but
I know
It-
periodically there are upsets that
Mhm.
cause the color to look different, but I mean, I'm certainly still steam coming out, but I'll follow up with them and get you an answer.
okay.
I only have 2 more slides. All right, so these will go quick. I mentioned the site-wide soil corrective actions where we're going to dig up those hot spots, those not hot spots, those 6 areas. We hope to get that implemented in the fourth quarter. We have to get EPD's approval of the plan. I mentioned we're going to install that aerobic bio wall. Parts of it will be installed, but it'll be completed in second quarter of 2023. We'll monitor the performance of those 3 groundwater systems and adjust as necessary. Once the corrective action plan is approved, we'll also start some investigations on site to tackle some additional source areas. We'll do that in 2023. And based on those results, we'll implement corrective actions if we need to. We'll submit progress reports to EPD quarterly. And we'll host a public availability session. When I say we, Hercules, at least on an annual basis. We'll try to time that, for significant events going on at the facility or with respect to remediation. So next slide. The public comment period is from August 31st to November 1st. EPD is hosting a public meeting at the Coastal College of Georgia. It's availability session from 3 to 5, and then the public meeting is from 6:30 to 9. Following that meeting, they'll collect comments and revise the corrective action plan if necessary, and incorporate it into the facility permit. So comments and questions on the corrective action plan can be submitted to Jim Slawinski. There's a public notice. It's also on our website, that herculesbrunswick.com. If you ever need any information, there's a lot of information on there, but Jim Slawinski's email's on there as well. So that was all I had. Sorry it took so long. I hope I answered your questions. We've accomplished a lot in the last couple of years.
Greg, how long have you been out there on the site?
I started on this site like November, December of 2019, but really in earnest 2020. So in a couple of years, we've made a lot of progress.
Thank you.
How many acres are comprise the site?
Is it 300 and?
Around 250, the northern part is probably 120. It's almost half and half.
They've got
Right.
public comment, but then.
I think that needs to be done. I've always heard a lot more, like 500 plus acres. And I can't remember exactly. That's why I need to be refreshed. And of course, the size of that thing out there is the major concern, that the city of Brunswick doesn't ever get that thing turned back over to us out there with it not being in pristine shape. And that applies to the east side and to the marsh and to Terry Creek and to Pre Creek also, to every bit of it. And I'll never see it get done the way we're doing, but I hope some of these folks up here will be here to see it get done, get cleaned up. And like you say, where the old stumps were over there on the east side over there, make it productive. A good golf driving range over there would be a
That's our
wonderful
goal.
thing. You know,
That was always my idea.
people could hit golf
Top ball.
balls out there, you know? So,
I've got a lot of confidence in these guys and they work hard.
They're not transient anyway. If they've been there since 2019, that's highly important. You're right.
And they, as y'all see, it's a lot of hard science and engineering and effort going into it. And then we're going to keep our nose to the grindstone and stay after it, 'cause it's important.
Well, I have one other question, the CAP,
Yeah.
you're right.
Corrective action plan.
Yeah, why is it only or why is it only scheduled to do 50% remediation for the chloroform contamination?
So that is an interim goal. That's not the
Okay.
final goal.
Mhm.
So, I mentioned it's an adaptive approach, right? We test the technologies in the lab. We get great performance out of them. When you implement them in the field, you can't see everything below the ground. It's a little bit different, so we need to translate what happened in the lab to in the ground, right? We know these technologies will work. We've implemented them other places. We didn't want to set an initial target that was too low and have somebody reject it, right? Because if we can get 50% reduction, it's working. It just needs a little bit more time. So that's a preliminary goal. We haven't worked through final remediation goals with EPD yet, but we want to do what we can do now and knock the contamination mass down or concentrations down.
So you'll be able to come up with something quantitative as to how close you're able to come to that 50%?
Mhm.
Okay, over what time period?
For each of those, we have about a year to demonstrate that 50%. Like I said, the lab studies, it gets a lot lower than that, but we want a safety factor in there. We don't want to discount a technology if it's working by setting some unrealistic standard, right out of the chute, right? So that's part of the adaptive management part of this.
Okay,
I think at
And-
the end of the day, we'll achieve something greater than that.
okay. So I guess we'll look forward to that report.
Right.
And then what is there's 2 sessions to that public comment. And you mentioned an availability session. What
Yeah,
does
so
that mean?
the first one is EPD will be there We'll be there. There's poster boards, there's will be tables set up.
Okay, so
They'll be
it's
there to answer-
informational. Okay.
and, look at stuff, answer questions, ask EPD questions. So it's just availability section if you have anything you want to talk to them about.
Okay. And then the meeting starts at 6:30 to 9 is,
There'll be an introduction by EPD and
So it's a
then they'll open the
presentation.
floor up, kind of like this, and people will come up and state their comment or
Okay.
question. There'll be a court recorder there recording all of it. EPD collects all those comments, takes them back, evaluates them, and then modifies the cap or asks us to modify the cap, based on those comments.
okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Well, I always appreciate the scientific and chemistry lesson, that we get during these presentations.
Well, good.
You're into the vertical and the horizontal. right?
Yes.
I just have real quick, just some rudimentary questions because this is my first time hearing the
Sure.
presentation. Number one, when you're testing the wells, what contaminants are you testing for?
It's a host of contaminants, so volatile organics, compounds, which are the main drivers in groundwater.
Okay.
In soil, so in groundwater, we look for volatile organics, we look for semi-volatile organics, we look for pesticides, and we look for metals,
Okay.
a lot.
And so are there different chemicals found in different spots?
Correct.
And so each hot spot maybe that we're seeing is a different kind of chemical that was released in that area.
Right, so there's basically two plumes. The plume on the southeast the anaerobic one, that's mostly chloroform. And the one on the northeast, this is in groundwater, is mostly benzene.
Okay.
Those are the primary contaminants. There's other things in there, but those are the main ones, the highest concentrations and the ones we're targeting.
Okay.
In soil, it's mostly toxaphene.
Say that one more time.
Toxaphene, which was a pesticide the plant made a number of years ago.
Okay.
And that's held in the,
Yeah.
that's the main one that's held in the fish too, correct? The wildlife,
I was about to give you this.
the toxaphene and the benzene, but more so the toxaphene.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which one?
Yep.
Is that? the
It's
most
fine.
common?
And the second question is, just so I know, when you're saying a well and you're saying groundwater, can you put that in a lay term where someone can understand how close that is in proximity to the water that we drink? Because
Sure.
what I don't want is in the areas of Jackson and Flint, I want to have a deep understanding of what we say when we say water.
Right. So I had that one diagram up there that kind of showed the aquifer systems below the Brunswick Peninsula. So we're in the upper superficial aquifer, which is remember, it's two parts. There's an upper and a lower.
Yep.
Upper superficial aquifer. So we're like at 100 feet.
Okay.
The Floridan aquifer, which is where most people get their water from, is like 600 or 700 feet deep.
Okay.
So it's, and in between there's a lot of confining units.
Okay.
And the confining units, basically, I don't say prevent, but they slow water movement down between, one aquifer and the next. and the
Gotcha.
next.
And so we're pulling from an aquifer a lot deeper
lot
than your
deeper.
initial.
Right.
The wells that you all dig are to merely test the groundwater at that level, though,
Right.
to see if the contaminated move.
Right. It's a 2-inch diameter PVC pipe, you get a drill rig.
And so what has been the effects that you all have seen these contaminants have had on vegetation or wildlife, if any?
Well, we haven't studied wildlife per se, but in the groundwater, the plume's still on site for the most part. And so there's nobody drinking that groundwater at that depth, right? So there's really no exposure to that groundwater, so there's no risk associated with it. I mean, we're still cleaning it up, but
Uh-huh.
there's no risk associated with it because nobody's drinking it.
And I guess I would be thinking like before we kind of had it even contained as it was going into groundwater or to the creek or what have you, there it's wildlife that ingests those things or those toxins.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, has there been any study of the effects those toxins have had on the wildlife in the area?
No, but we do fish, so it's not part of the the plant site.
Mhm.
You know, there's the Terry Creek
Right.
Superfund site.
Yeah.
We do monitor fish tissue, once every 2 years.
Okay.
And we did a big sediment removal project back in like 1999, 2000 timeframe.
Okay.
And concentrations in the fish tissue have consistently declined since that removal
Okay.
action. So not the subject of the corrective action plan, but we are implementing a remedy on the outfall ditch as part of the Superfund process. So there's EPA manages that process, the state manages the other one. So we're going to remedy the outfall ditch, which is a conveyance channel, you know, that collects stormwater from the city of Brunswick and cooling water from the plant site. And we're going to address that and continue to monitor fish tissue. And we hope to see another, you know, step decrease decline in fish tissue concentrations, you know, once we implement that remedy. So those plans are in and approved by EPA. You know, there's a long-term monitoring plan associated with it, which includes monitoring fish tissue. And so that is also an adaptive management approach where you implement a remedy, you monitor the performance, you go back and say, we need to do a little bit more, right? And so we're doing the outfall ditch now. We're going to continue to monitor the fish and see what kind of reduction in concentrations we have. Yeah, in October, the week.
And that's the test for the fish tissue?
Right.
And just, and
So-
you may be able to send it to me. How significant has the decrease been in the toxins of the fish tissue?
I can get that to you.
Okay.
We've got it, we submit a report to EPD and EPA
Perfect.
on that, and I can share that with you. And it's actually, it's probably on our website, herculesbrunswick.com,
Okay.
but we can send that to you.
Appreciate that. And this is my last question. I know we do full studies on the land, we do full studies on soil, water, fish tissues. Has there been any remote study done on the actual effects of humans who have ingested those fish or anything over time?
There was a broad study back in the late 90s of the whole community that looked at a lot of these issues and you know, candidly came back very, very favorably. It wasn't the horror show that some people would try to portray. It was by and large, you know, it was painted a picture of a relatively healthy community that wasn't being overwhelmingly impacted by these kinds of issues. I can get you a copy of that too. It was very comprehensive. That'd be perfect.
Weren't there some tracings of an increase in cancer rates, though?
I think so.
That's,
I think there was a rumor that said that. I don't believe that study, a matter of fact, I think it said the opposite. There was not any statistical evidence of that.
were you done? Okay, I wanted to go back real quick to the chloroform in the groundwater. As we go through this adaptive approach and we get a year under the belt, based on those findings, and I think you said that this has been proven to be effective in other situations, how long can we expect to move closer to 100% removal of the chloroform in the groundwater?
Well, like I said, getting 100% is
Yeah,
like every
well,
molecule, right?
as
We can't
close as
get every
possible.
molecule. So, the lab studies, we treated the water in 2 months to 3 months. So as that water flows through, it'll take, months to flow through it because it's only flowing at
40
50 feet per
yeah.
year, right? So, I mean, it will be a long process. I can't really give you an answer to that, but it's, as Mark opened this up, there's no magic bullet. It took a long time to contaminate the aquifer. It's going to take a fairly long time to clean it up.
This is my last question. What is your predictive percentage of remediation? What you aiming for?
Which chemical are you talking about?
Just, we're moving through the entire process.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't determined that yet. I
Okay.
mean, we would like to say we could get it down below MCLs, which is maximum contaminant levels, but that's if somebody's drinking the water, right? And nobody's drinking the water. So we need to work through that during the corrective action process with EPB. So we have to talk to their risk assessors. They'll talk to our risk assessors, and we'll come up with a risk-based cleanup concentration for the groundwater and the soil for that matter.
Real quick, what's going on over at the paint factory and there at the motels on the north side of the plant there around the? where
You mean with the
fence is?
crane and stuff?
Where the fence is.
On that side.
Yeah.
The testing is anything going on out there?
No, that's not us.
I know you were testing at the paint factory. I just haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah,
We do have some sampling wells there, but haven't been, we haven't been able to sample those for the past 4 or 5 years.
That's all pretty red underneath there. I remember seeing all the stuff when it's been several years when I got involved with it first. It was unbelievable.
that's at the paint factory.
The paint factory and across the street from it. That was an old restaurant over there called Cruise Restaurant. And then a restaurant called the Galley over there.
Yep, remember that?
It was unbelievable how much was underneath the ground there. I'd like to know, Mark, if you could find out what's going on there. And I also would like to know how many employees they have out at Panova now. That'd be great if you do that. And one other thing is that we're supposed to have warnings out there letting folks know that that fish and crab, that waters are contaminated. I wish y'all would be sure that those are in the proper place and that they're there.
We have put a number of them up. Sometimes manuals taken out, but I'll double check and make sure they're all.
I think there needs to be a periodic check that those things are
Well,
still in
we
place.
checked them. They're still there.
Yeah.
Kristen came down, my colleague, and she checked them yesterday.
Okay.
So I know they're still there.
How many do you have? Do you know?
5 or 6 probably.
If we could get that information. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, we can show you where they're posted. I
Thank
know
you.
there's right under the Causeway Bridge. And there's some, on the plant property facing out toward the water. Yeah,
There at the paint factory, to the north side, it should be. People fishing crab, I mean, they wade out there. And fish and crab, they're out there almost every time I go out there.
Crabbing actually is no issue with the plants. It's bacteria that's the main issue there. But I think shrimp are in there.
yeah, the shrimp are okay.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you all, Mr. Rouse, Mr. Johnson. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you.
Thank
You too. Moving on through the agenda, we will now move on to item 4, presentation from Director Alverson. Rethinking the runoff plan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You may remember in 2020, fall of 2020, we received a coastal incentive grant from Georgia DNR to develop a rethinking runoff plan. And what that is a plan to use green infrastructure and low impact development features to try to take some demand and pollutants off of our storm drainage system and get the runoff water back into the ground and promote the natural cycle of runoff. We partnered with UGA Marine Extension on that grant, and Goodwin Mills and Kaywood was selected as the consulting engineer for the engineering and GIS mapping task for the grant. And so we're finishing up that project. We have a final draft of the plan, a final rendition of the plan. So we want to share that with you tonight and kind of give you an update on where we are with that plan and show you the final product. We have with us tonight Jess Brown from UGA Marine Extension and Rob Brown from Goodwin Mills and Kaywood. So I'm going to turn it over to them and let them share the plan with you.
Thank you, Director, and welcome, Ms. Brown, Mr. Brown.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm actually gonna try to play IT as well this evening, but if that's not favorable, it's hard to be there. So, as Mr. Albertson mentioned, my name is Jessica Brown, and I am representing the University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grants.
Can I ask one favor of you?
Yes, sir.
Can you stand closer, a little bit closer to the mic so they can hear you online?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Is
That's
that better? Yep. Perfect. Just mentioning Jessica Brown with the University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grants, and really honored for the opportunity to share with you a little bit more about the city of Brunswick's rethinking runoff plan. I would be completely remiss if I skipped over recognizing the humongous efforts of not only the project team, but the design team, just the collective effort of the folks that were contributing to this plan. You can see the project team on the screen. Many of the city's departments, engineering, planning, neighborhoods were very involved when sharing not only knowledge, but information to inform the plan. In addition, several key partners. I mentioned this is a grant funded project. It's received coastal incentive grant from the Department of Natural Resources Coastal Resource Division. See them recognized there as well. But in addition to city's role as well as the funder, UGA Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant had, along with partners at Goodwin Mills and Kaywood, had the distinct honor of operationalizing this plan. GMC was very involved, as Mr. Albertson mentioned, in the technical components, the GIS, the engineering design for this. UGA's role is really more in the community outreach and education around the plan, as well as the document that I hope you all received a link to the actual formalized plan. Also really key partnerships with the Nature Conservancy and the local Keep America Beautiful affiliate with Keep Golden Isles Beautiful, really helping to get that message out. And we're completely indebted to many of the residents who also spent hours, over 100 hours of community engagement in providing their own lived experience and their institutional knowledge to help move it forward. Normally, I would spend quite a bit of time talking about stormwater runoff and the effects of flooding and the pollution that's part of that. But as you all are aware, this is our reality. This is quite a frequent challenge for those of us living, working, playing in Brunswick. And so just as a kind of recap for the overview of the entire plan, as was mentioned earlier, this was funded through grant funding, pass-through dollars from NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, through a coastal incentive grant. The primary objectives were to look at shovel-ready projects. So projects that could move forward in engineering, design, and implementation pretty readily, that would address either a flooding or a water quality concern within the city. And also to identify locations, particularly city properties, faith-based properties, community recognized locations that would help increase awareness and provide education that would serve as demonstrations. So you'll see that many of these properties are not on private lands, they're public. One of the major themes throughout the entire planning process was the sense of place. How important it is to know where in amongst the city these projects could potentially be located, which neighborhoods they're in, the culture, the people that surround those individual locations. At the outset, we identified 52 different properties. That process was further refined using soils data information, as well as a desktop analysis looking at a matrix of different engineering components that would inform the feasibility of putting stormwater green infrastructure using native materials to treat that floodwater. So that list was further reduced, and I'm happy to say that we selected 28 different sites to create profiles, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, to be featured in the plan. They're organized there again by that same structure that I alluded to earlier. We recognize 10 different locations in city parks, 7 different city or right-of-way locations, 3 schools, and a handful of neighborhood and community locations as well. It's really important for me to point out that the grant's purpose was to look at planning and identifying. There is not an intention, or the scope of this project, there is an intention. There's not, the scope of this project was not to implement these projects. However, I want to talk a little bit about the potential impact. The implementation potential, if all of these practices were proposed to or implemented, we'd be looking at treating the impervious cover, that material that actually the gentleman referred to earlier, that doesn't allow water to infiltrate back into the ground, 25 acres of impervious cover at a cost of 3.7 million, but would handle 28 million gallons of stormwater a year. So 28 million for me, that's a little bit hard to wrap my head around, but that's about 25,000 bathtubs. If you look at an average size bathtub, it's a lot of water, about a 50-foot square cube. I mentioned earlier, there was a pretty intensive community engagement process, several community outreach events, some MPA meetings, lots of community input as to the location of several of these projects, as well as what the potential outcomes could be. The sites were recommended for all neighborhoods, with the exception of the tri-area. All of the ones are actually on the border of the tri-area of if we look at neighborhoods. And we're continuing that outreach. There's been some that's funded as part of the project, but we'll talk about a little bit more about that later. I mentioned impact earlier. So there again, assuming that we would move forward, not just let the plan sit on the shelf with implementation. When we look to industry leaders, larger municipalities, the metric that's being used is the greened acre. And that's an acre of impervious cover that's been retrofitted to utilize those green infrastructure, that vegetated or permeable surface, to decentralize that stormwater. The impact that we see is that 25 acres that I referenced earlier. But when we look at development within the city of Brunswick, we're not completely impervious, like say Philadelphia, who is referencing this greened acre. When we look at impact in Brunswick, you can actually look at something that maybe is 100 acres. So you're looking at much larger impact with the reduction of that flooding if we were to move forward with these practices. I alluded to the site profiles earlier, but there's 28 of these sites identified. For each site, there is this profile, and there's a few examples, or there's an example in the slides there again. Would encourage you to reference the entire plan, but wanted to step through a little bit of the layout. So again, a 2-page spread. On the left-hand side, you'll see the GIS map that GMC has created for us that's using contours, and we have the shaded polygons representing where those green infrastructure practices would be located, and they're sized appropriately and referenced in that map. So you can, they're actually relative to scale. So have that map. In addition to the map on that page, you will see a preliminary design table, which includes the disconnection area. So how much of that impervious surface would be disconnected with the proposed practice? So for instance, here, we're proposing permeable pavement and bioretention. What those areas would look like, how much water we would actually be able to treat on both a permanent design parameter, that water quality event, as well as on an annual basis, what the estimated volume is, as well as an estimated cost, using some very recent construction cost in coastal Georgia. Excuse me. On the right-hand side for each of these sites, I have 3 representative photographs. There again, you see the polygon overlaid where the potential practice would be located. All of this was conducted through a field exercise, engaging undergraduate students and field staff. All of our desktop analysis was confirmed in the field, as well as a written overview about what would want to achieve at each of those locations. Furthermore, particularly in that community engagement, we recognize the power of visual representation. And so for 3 of the sites, Goodwin Mills and Kaywood's landscape architecture department went and did some landscape renderings of actual photographs of some strategic properties that were selected as part of that community engagement process. So you can see Liberty Ship Park is one, as well as Risley High School, Glen Middle. Were some of the ones that the community wanted to see what these would look like. And so you can see from the rendering. And those are also represented throughout the plan. So the possibly the most important piece and what we're pleased with the product. How do we move that forward? And so plans sitting on a shelf are not very useful to those of us in Brunswick. So what are the potential for leveraged efforts? Brunswick is already being recognized as an innovative leader with this work. This is one of 2 plans in the state of Georgia, in coastal Georgia that's like this. Last week alone, we hosted a workshop with 25 different individuals representing 11 different municipalities that are looking at possibly translating this work in their community. That's something that we can certainly be proud of. But this plan will also be a stepping stone to inform several of our other plans, some of which regulatory and permitted, our stormwater master plan as well. This plan will be used to inform or review the green infrastructure low impact development program, which is part of our stormwater management program. There's a specific BMP. This will actually be used in that review, as well as, I'm sure you all are aware, we participate in FEMA's voluntary CRS program. There are elements of this plan that can help inform the next activities to pursue in participation with that. And I think there's a few obvious ones in terms of projects with the comp plan, but maybe one that's not so obvious is that project for developing the comprehensive park plan. Early on, I noted there were 10 different sites that we've already looked at how to proactively enhance or preserve, utilize that existing space to help alleviate a flooding challenge. So they're again utilizing this plan to inform those other plans. And I'm proud that the city, through the leadership with the Department of Engineering, has already received additional grant funding to move a subset of these plans into action. So we're happy to be working in partnership through a 319 Section H funded project there again with the Georgia Environmental Protection Division to select 3 of these that will be moving forward. Liberty Ship Park as one of them, as demonstrations and opportunities to further engage the public on this very important work. Thank you for your time. I thought that was my last slide, but I'm happy to answer any questions and will also pass on questions to my colleagues. If
How
appropriate.
much is the additional grant funding, you know?
For the implementation of those 3 projects? Yeah,
So what's the 3?
It just shy of $300,000 was the estimate, but Carol would follow up.
What's the 3 projects?
The 3 projects, there was language in there that they could potentially be revised, but the proposed were Liberty Ship Park, Goodyear Park, and rainwater harvesting and permeable pavement at the fire station off of Gloucester.
I realize this is all public right of way, city-owned property that we're talking about.
Most all. There are a few locations that were faith-based or,
Right.
but
Okay.
yeah, most all of it.
Because
city.
I think part of our biggest problem is with private development, large commercial developments that have huge amount of impervious surface, parking, building, the amount of roof coverage, all of that. And then the resulting flooding in neighborhood areas has a profound effect. So my question is, I would love to see something if depending on how the outcome of this is, taking that to private developers and creating incentives. I know we have some of that through our stormwater management plan, but I mean, something that really means something to developers that are coming in and redeveloping and stripping out huge acreage and putting in paved parking and buildings. And then we end up with all this stormwater runoff that you just can't manage it. So to me, those are almost the bigger issues that really need to be looked at, as opposed to some of the, public owned, municipal, county owned property that for the most part are parks already, but they can still be improved upon. I'm not trying to minimize what's going on here, but I think I personally, and I'm sure the other commissioners would like to see something that's then pushed out to incentivize private development.
And it ties back to the stormwater management. Coach is talking about all of where now runoff production site as it developed and redeveloped using these green infrastructure features. So we're hopeful that us implementing some of these kind of leading the way, hopefully developers will see that and start to use some of those as well. We can start to look at some kind of incentive plan for them and maybe tie that into our ordinance.
Yeah, I think especially since we, Highway 17, that whole corridor area. I mean, we're looking at a pretty sizable project now that's going to have a lot of impervious surface coverage on that.
I would ask about the selection of the 3 projects, because thinking about even Liberty Harbor, and I saw the picture of Albany Street on there. And so my question would be, how were these projects, the initial projects selected? Because when I'm looking at Albany Street, which has been a consistent flooding problem, a runoff problem. And so I guess I'm tying my question into how did you select these? Because I'm thinking about the priority of these projects. Are these just smaller testing areas? Because for me, Albany Street is smack dab in the midst of a community, and it's a most traveled route versus Liberty Harbor Park is visited, but it's not traveled per se.
Right.
These sites that we selected they're smaller scale sites so that we could implement them under the grant funding that we got. Obviously with the grant, we've got limited funding.
Okay.
We are currently working on Albany Street. The design is nearly complete for Albany Street drainage improvements. That's gonna be a multi-million-dollar project to implement that. So it would not be able to be
Okay.
feasible under this. So they were just smaller scale projects so that we could fit them within the grant parameters, I guess you'd say.
And see, and that's important because when, as commissioners sitting up here, those questions are going to come to us. And we need to be able to address those questions with an understanding behind the reasoning that these projects were chosen as they were. Because for me, if I'm just out there in the community and what we've just experienced on Albany Street yet again, and pretty much every time there's a pretty decent rainfall, I would want to know what's the priority of the area in which I'm residing, and this being a historical problem.
We've taken the top 4 projects from our stormwater master plan, the top 4 prioritized projects. And we've set them aside as 4 standalone projects, and we're in the process of designing those, Macon and Talmadge, Albany, Wildwood Ditch, and Riverside neighborhood. And like I say, those are in the process of being designed, and so those will be able to go to construction as funding comes available. So, but Albany Street is one of those that's in the process of design as a standalone project.
And see, and I think that's good public relations and getting that information out there. I know we know about it because we're in the meetings on it. We've seen the plans and all of that stuff for it, but the community hasn't. They don't. And so to let them know that what they are encountering, we are working on solutions for that. They're not overnight solutions, but they are not forgotten. And so when things like that happen, people do feel like they are forgotten. And so we want to make sure that every community that's experiencing this problem knows that they are not forgotten.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes, ma'am.
we just talked on the 4 projects that Gerald was mentioning, and we just got to a milestone of the design and engineering being close to being completed. We were actually planning for October 19th, I think, or somewhere in the next month to come back to the commission. And we certainly will make sure that that is put in the paper and made public at that time. But we were kind of getting to a milestone on those projects. And again, it's been a while since we started, and I know you are aware, of us being in this process, but that's a good point to make. We will try and make something public in addition to bringing it before the commission.
Even if you just put something out within those communities to let them know, put something out on Riverside, put something over on Albany and all of the other 2 that are included in the priority projects right now, put it out there and let them know, even if you can't give a definitive, put it out there and let them know this is coming, those type of things. So people will know they're not forgotten.
These are sort of like project design areas. Good idea.
Well, and if I might add, one of the lessons learned from the other plan that I referenced, that there's 2, in that plan, the sites that were selected were all included, but the other sites that we looked at, there was no justification for why they were not included. And that's some of the feedback that we heard from those constituents, those public meetings is, can you give me some sort of reason why that wasn't included? And so I'm happy in the rethinking runoff plan, there is an appendix for all the sites. So for instance, Albany did come up, but because that project was underway, the recommendation is this is coming. We're aware. For sites that couldn't even explore a green infrastructure opportunity because it needed something bigger or something different, that was also stated, and it would be a great resource as far as having some of those difficult conversations about what was included, what was not, and why.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question for you, and I'm gonna let you go, I promise. And mine's is more of, again, a basic kind of science question. When you remediate in these ways, I always imagined kind of the ground, well, 2 questions. One, I see some areas that I thought weren't impervious surfaces. Is it because the soil has hardened or turned into something where water isn't getting through, or is there, because when I look at Goodyear Park, I kind of, not gonna lie, I just thought that I was already on the ground. I didn't know that I was on concrete or something right there.
So very astute observation. Two things I would point out. In Goodyear, where that parking is, you are correct. There's not an impervious surface. However, there's been so much parking and so much activity, it's compacted so that it performs a lot like a concrete
Gotcha.
surface.
Gotcha.
But some of those parks, and I've been focusing on the green infrastructure applications, what we can do to implement. Some of the recommendations are actually more in line with low impact development. What can we do to preserve and conserve? In a lot of our park space, it's exactly that. How can we route stormwater that's in our streets, that's flooding people's homes, into that green space and allow that to infiltrate and recharge groundwater versus sitting on the impervious surface? So those are those
So-
recommendations.
So are there, and you may not have looked at all of them, are there other parks or places that naturally would be a surface that could be permeated by rain that is now compacted? I just think about, like when I go out to Mary Ross Park, the middle of Mary Ross Park seems very compacted as well. And I just don't know if there is scientifically a space where your ground becomes compacted so much that you're at the space where you need to turn soil, you need to, I don't know what the process is, but stay on top of ensuring that it doesn't become an impervious surface.
Yes, so there was a basic analysis performed in some of those field site assessments. It was not very invasive, very preliminary. However, and I skipped kind of quickly over some of the technical aspects. There, we were able to take all of the soils information. So there are native soils in Brunswick that are not conducive to water moving into the ground.
Gotcha.
And so as part of GMC's effort to put that in that online mapping tool that I've put up, we created a matrix looking at, is the soil appropriate? Is there site, is there a possibility from an engineering perspective? And what is the education? So there's a whole matrix that factored in. And so in places that the soils were not appropriate, those were not included for that reason.
Gotcha.
And we do have, unfortunately, a fair amount of those.
And so, last questions, I promise. The Goodyear, the mitigation you all would be looking to do in that area would be to dig that soil up to freshen it so water could move through it.
So the two practices, and I might have to cross-check. At Goodyear, there are two primary practices, 3 different locations, but 2 primary practices. Just briefly, a bioretention practice, which we have demonstration, an excellent one at Coffin Park, but that is creating a shallow landscape depression, utilizing an existing kind of swale feature in the middle of the park, replanting that with some native vegetation that will help remove the pollutants from any runoff that we're kind of redirecting there.
Mhm.
The other section of Goodyear is actually looking at permeable pavement where we're already parking those highly compacted areas.
Right.
That would involve removing that material, putting in a stone storage layer. So instead of having water on top of the street, actually moving under that parking area in the storage layer, but having permeable parking. And there's a couple of different products that are used for that,
I do
but
know.
you'd actually be creating that storage under the parking.
Okay. Perfect.
One of the benefits of that is you can still use it for parking.
For parking. That's good. I appreciate the work that you've done on it. It's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for Director seeking out the grant money and doing the hard work to pour into our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
you.
University of Georgia also.
I think
Yes.
it's great that
Thank you.
Brunswick is on the forefront of all of that, and thank you for your hard work, and Gero, you and your team, thank you.
We will now move on to number 4A, which is the wayfinding. And we're looking forward to this. This is
Yes,
Continue.
The tiny sign.
very quick
Yeah.
update on our wayfinding. Just wanted to let you all know that we have gotten to the point where installation is coming soon. So possibly starting before the next meeting, and I'll let Tim talk about it. By the way, want to thank Tim and Garrow for just tremendous work that they've done to keep this project moving,
Yeah.
to get over all the obstacles put in our way and making sure we got to this point. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, good evening. Yeah, this has been, as I understand it, a 5-year project.
No, it's been more than
Been a
that.
long time.
So I am pleased to announce that we are within 2 weeks of having this complete. Their original timeline was that they would have footings dug this week, installation by the end of the month. They ran into a delay because of the utility locate has held them up. You have seen by now the place markers around the city that represent the sites. I received this yesterday, which is actually what our signs will look like. They'll be reflective. This is just the 3 color codes. Currently, they're going to be mounted on kind of a silver gray galvanized pole. I've already gone to DOT and asked if we had any flexibility, if we wanted to wrap the poles with one of these reflective colors. And they've given me the okay to do that. So I think what we'll do is we'll wait till they're up, evaluate it. This company is actually sending me samples of all 3 colors. And then we can actually look at them in the field and see what looks best. But as it stands right now with no other issues, we're looking at the first week of October, we will have our signs up and clean. So of course, this is not the size.
Right.
How many
So-
signs will that be, Tim?
28. Yes, sir.
And they will be on some kind of metal, you're saying?
There's a metal pole, about a 3-inch metal pole
Right,
that will be bracketed to the.
but I mean, the signs themselves, are they metal?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
there will be metal
And
mounted to
then
the back.
all of it's reflective, not just the wording?
That's correct.
Okay.
Everything
Yeah.
that's inside the framework, it will be reflective. And that was kind of an easy sell to GDOT
Mhm.
because as it will stand, the poles will not be
Mhm.
reflective. So it would just help drivers,
Mhm.
headlights pick up the poles at greater distances. So barring any issues, we look to have this one closed after the first week of October.
Very good.
Yeah, because those of us that are visually impaired, we need to see the pole, so
Long
we
before.
take the pole out before we take a long.
Well, as funny as GDOT has been through this whole process, I'm shocked that hasn't been something that was
Mhm.
discussed. All the discussion has been about the sign, but not about the pole.
Yeah.
Just that it was breakaway.
What's the process to add additional signs as different businesses open, different locations, whatever?
Outside of painful,
Oh, okay.
it's a long process of marking your location.
Yeah, Getting
Getting
approval.
a sign company, if say it's the same style sign, then it has to go through GDOT and through Atlanta to be approved site, distances, off the roadway and from intersections. And there's so many, so much framework around this thing. And we have one sign that I'm having it made up. We may not be able to mount it because of its logistics, and it's at the corner of Newcastle and Gloucester facing to the east. It was drawn to be mounted in the middle of the sidewalk, which is not going to work because the signs are too large. So everybody hit their head on them. I tried to get it to mount to the light pole.
Yeah.
That was shot down by GDOT. Would not approve it. Then I tried to see if they would let me mount it diagonally on the back of the other pole, and that doesn't fit in their parameters.
They don't want it to be practical.
No.
They don't want it.
They have not. So we're going to have it in case we ever get to be able to find a solution that works. But
Well, it's good to see it finally come to this point because, I mean, I know John and I've been, yeah, came on the commission talking gateways and signage, and so it's great to finally see this and to know that we've budgeted for it and we're getting it executed. So I'm really pleased.
And you're gonna get a tree, right?
Sure,
Julie's gonna get a tree.
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Whatever that means.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Tree on the side.
Appreciate you.
Oh, the tree on the sign. Nah, I don't get that tree. Yeah.
We'll now move on to items to be considered for approval. And consider approval of September 7th, 2022 regular scheduled minutes.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We move to number 6, consider approval of City of Brunswick Defined Benefit Pension Plan Amendment number 16, City Manager McDuffie.
Good evening. This is just a very simple amendment to our pension plan. It basically redefines or revises the definition of the word compensation, because our plan currently states that any compensation that's provided to any employee is subject to the 3% pension contribution. When the governor approved for the $1,000 public safety compensation, he specifically said that it was not. And because of that, our plan was in contradiction with that order. So this basically expands our definition of compensation in case that happens again, so that we will be able to issue whatever compensation and not be subject to the 3% if it's not allowable. And that's basically all this amendment is, and needs to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for City Manager?
So you said it changed the definition. So what is the definition now?
The definition basically states that we have, any compensation is subject to that 3% pension contribution.
So what are they defining as compensation?
Any payment that's made to our employees for any reason. Any and all.
Because I was gonna ask about like when we do bonuses and awards. How
Any
is that?
compensation.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, we'll now open it for a motion.
Well, what's in that? What is it? I make
Number 6.
number 6.
Yeah, okay.
Motion to consider, motion to accept the new definition. That's what we're looking at. The new definition for the City of Brunswick Defined Benefit Pension Plan, Amendment number 16.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you, City Manager McDuffie. We'll now move on to a discussion point, number 7, proposed annexation petition, number 22-01, and rezoning petition, number 2203. Director Hunter, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mayor, Commission. Give me 1 second here while I share my screen. So if you will recall, back in June, you were sent a packet via email regarding a annexation application for 2 parcels. One is owned by the estate of Mary Herod. It's 10.11 acres at 3211 Glen Avenue. It's commonly known as the Palmetto Trailer Park. The second parcel was 0.03 acres at 3302 Glen Avenue. It's commonly known as the Golden Isles Inn. I have on screen the survey that goes along with that annexation request. The area in the middle that's kind of outlined by the dotted line in the U shape is the area proposed for annexation. As y'all know, we have some kind of unusual borders in some areas of town. And this was an area that to the south is completely in the city, and to the north and to the west are completely in the city. As potential owners were going through due diligence for further development, they placed, which would be Maritime Homes LLC. They made the application for annexation. We sent that request to Glenn County as required under OCGA annexation requirements. They had 30 days to respond. If they had any issues with it, they had none. This application has since gone to the Planning and Appeals Commission, where it has had 2 public hearings about the annexation and the rezoning. For tonight's purposes, in order to be able to move forward with the annexation, what we are here to request is that, as you know, an annexation has to be adopted as an ordinance. So in a similar format to when we add a new ordinance, we bring that draft ordinance to you, and you provide instruction for us to advertise that ordinance and hold a public hearing at the next meeting. We have the draft ordinance for annexation in your packet as well. And your packet has a whole lot of other information in it. It has the annexation application, the rezoning requests that came along with this. I provided that to you all well in advance so that you would have as much time to go through that as possible and generate questions as we go forward through this process. But for tonight's purposes, what we are seeking is to move forward with the advertisement of the public hearing and the ordinance under review. That's the short summary of that. There is a ton in that packet. I would say that it's best that I'll be coming out with a new staff report for y'all prior to the October 5th meeting. That will actually break this into 2 separate components. So it's a little bit easier for you. You'll have the annexation and the rezoning, and there's very specific step-by-step process that we'll have to go through in terms of which public hearing we have first, which item we adopt first, or if you choose to defer at that time, or however you choose to take action. As I said, the Planning and Appeals Commission has also reviewed this. Their recommendation will be in that upcoming staff report to you as well. This is tried to be as succinct as I could with it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got at this time.
Director Hunter, I just want to say thank you for all of the staff work that you did ahead of time and had some time to go through it. And I appreciate you turning it into bite size for us in the future for us to be able to take in and digest. I just have one question.
Sure.
In the staff breakdown of, I'm assuming is the first one I'm looking at is the annexation proposal.
Yes.
Under guiding principles, number, let me see, number 6, it says Glen Avenue should evolve into an activity center that is complementary to, but not competitive with downtown Brunswick. What precipitated that, and what exactly does that mean?
That's a good question. So if we go very far back in the 2000s into the early 2010s, there was a lot of visioning work along the Glen Avenue corridor. We had multiple studies that culminated in a process in 2016 where we created, we already had an overlay district that had been in effect, I believe since 2004. But in 2016, we did a very extensive public input process to beef up that overlay and create design guidelines. Those guiding principles are based on that public input process and what our community wanted to see take place within that corridor as it redeveloped.
Mhm.
And essentially the community as a whole felt like we didn't need to put all of our eggs in one basket. So as much attention as we paid to the redevelopment of Glen Avenue, we didn't need to set up something that directly competed with downtown Brunswick in
Okay.
our traditional commercial core. Basically, we didn't want to create a kind of an urban sprawl situation
Okay.
where the new development bled the existing development dry.
Mhm.
That's probably the best way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
and that they would
definitely
have
the best way for me, because I was about to,
different flavors, different characters.
yeah.
Right, and not to be duplicative, we've got a very unique setting in our downtown.
Mhm.
We didn't want to replicate that. We didn't want to have literally take these type buildings and take them and plop them in that area. It needed to evolve on its own with respect to what we had within the city.
Thank you.
That's a good question. I forget sometimes that not everybody has been around for that process.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any additional questions for Director Hunter?
I know I attended the public hearing for the Planning and Appeals Commission and stated that I was in favor of it, but wanted to make sure any underbrush that was removed wasn't done in the dark of night and didn't include larger trees, which I see under recommendation. They did mention clearing underbrush. So if we have specifics that we want to recommend going forward that are in addition to what,
You will have that opportunity at the next city commission hearing.
Okay.
So this is setting
go
that
through
up
public hearing.
so
and-
that we
yeah.
have the public hearings that are required for both the annexation and the rezoning. You've got the opportunity to dive more into these details about the development and ask these questions about any type of impacts that are known at this time. There are going to be a lot of them. We
Mhm.
don't have all those answers at this time because this process requires a concept plan. And so you're kind of caught in the chicken or the egg scenario of you have enough of a concept plan to be able to judge, are these uses appropriate for this location and for the proposed zoning and the general impacts on the surrounding area? Would it be consistent? And from those knowns, what type of additional I won't say restrictions, but
Right,
the
right.
additional conditions that you'd like to see taking in as much of this is one of the more controlled areas that we have in the city because of the design guidelines that we have in place.
Mhm.
As you'll know, last year we beefed up our buffer requirements. So as that impacts neighboring properties, there's going to be screening requirements that frankly, we haven't had before. As this development interacts with a GDOT right of way, there's going to be a lot of GDOT requirements that are met that we actually have very little control over. It's the development, what they think their traffics are going to be, how GDOT interprets that. And what they say is, it's as very simple as, yes, we want a traffic light, or no, you need to reroute this and move everything this way, so with all those variables in place, that we're trying to provide the best information we can based on the concept.
Right. So if you could, I think it might be helpful. Obviously, this is the very first step. They've got to have it annexed into the city. So it's all held under one jurisdiction and one tax entity. Same thing with the what am I trying to say? The plan of, what the
The plan
approval-
development text. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So-
that zoning, so they know,
The
yes,
zoning, the
we can
rezoning, thank you,
actually,
yeah.
we can actually build this here. Now we have to meet density requirements, height requirements, landscape requirements, our tree protection that we have in that area,
Mhm.
buffer requirements, all those other things get laid on top of that as part of the permitting process typically. Typically with any development, y'all don't see the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah.
But this is an incredibly important redevelopment project for the
Mhm.
city. I felt very strongly with that. Typically, we don't bring that process before you. You'll notice in the staff recommendation, I recommended bringing that process to you.
Yeah.
So you will get to see that as it evolves through the 50% plan and through the 90% plan. So before they get issued the building permit, y'all are aware of what's happening.
Yeah, and that, thank you, because that was really what I was kind of pushing towards is at what point will something come back before us and what is our role in, either further adapting the plan or approving it or whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, it would definitely come back before you. Obviously, it's going to be a lot of work on our part, working with the developer and his team. It's been quite a while since we've had even
We're rusty.
anything like this attempted
Yeah.
in the city. And since that time, we have changed our requirements. I think we learned from some of our past processes.
Yeah.
This is in an area where we do have, design guidelines. We're used to dealing with, one building here or there in the historic district. It's a different animal when you're talking about a large multifamily development, a large townhouse development. There's so many variables there with flood elevations and stormwater requirements. And, it's going to be very, very intensive from the engineering department, the planning department, our whole DRT team as we start reviewing the actual buildings themselves, because the fire marshal involvement, and we have economic development, downtown development, look at it just for, extra eyes. And so they know what those impacts are going to be on their areas as well. It's going to be a really, it sounds weird, but it's going to be a really fun process for us. We like this stuff.
So when you've got it titled the Special District Plan Development. So tie that in.
Tie
for-
that in together.
Yes.
So
Because
yeah, that's
when
where,
I'm thinking about special district, I'm going back to my GMA training.
Yep.
The taxable property impact, the taxation on I'm thinking about, it. So tie that in. for
so
me.
yeah, so that's a specific, it's kind of a double reference to the Glen Avenue design framework and our typical ordinances. In the Glen Avenue design standards, we designated special districts. They have the same performative concept. It could be a planned development, but it also could be something like Goodyear Elementary School was specified as a special district because it's an
Education.
atypical use.
Mhm.
And so that references both those sections of code. Normally, you don't see that. Normally, when I come before you with a plan development, it's just straight plan development. But in this instance, we had that special district within the US 17 overlay plan development in general.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so because we're usually trying to, I'm from a GMA training, we're usually going in and considering and seeing about doing special districts and all that
Right.
kind of stuff.
And
because of-
so, yeah, thinking with GMA, you're thinking of a special district like a TAC.
Yeah.
Or in
forget some of
particularly an
the-
enterprise zone or.
And some of the other ones that they call when they're just doing, just specifically for businesses. Yeah, so that's, I'm kind of thinking about that, because then we're really looking at the tax implications and how that collection will serve that specific district and the distribution for that specific district. So that's when I saw that, my mind is going to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so it is slightly different than that. And it really is just confined, that special district is just confined to the US 17 overlay.
Okay, just because of that. Okay.
And can we, in fact, say that as part of the overall project that we would ask for a completion bond?
Yes, we do have that ability.
Any additional questions? Thank you so much, Director Hunter. Appreciate your work. And thank you for adding that in to bring it back to us at those appropriate times so we could stay abreast of what's going on. So we appreciate that. Yes, it is consensus.
Mhm.
Yes.
So we would have a public hearing at the next meeting and then final vote following the same meeting?
You could potentially have the final vote at the same meeting. Obviously, that's at your discretion. You always have the option to defer and take in further information, or if you feel that you haven't gotten enough answers to your
Okay,
questions.
yeah.
Yeah, that's always an option.
Okay, thank you.
We concede for you to proceed.
But it just is going to require one public hearing for,
Correct.
okay. If, who?
Well, so technically two. So we'll actually.
Oh, because
One for each.
rezoning and one for
Right.
annexation.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, I think we will adjourn to executive session for the purposes of litigation.
We do have litigation. That's correct.
And so do I hear a motion?
Motion to, go ahead, Julie.
A motion to adjourn to executive session for litigation.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing the first and a second, all those in favor show by the sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Got it.
We now call this city commission meeting
Got it.
back to order. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the settlement and general release agreement between the city of Brunswick and Atlanta Gas Light Company and Pride Utility related to the lawsuit filed by the city in Glenn County Superior Court.
Hearing a,
Oh,
hearing a first, do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. And now I will entertain a motion
I'll
for
make a
adjournment.
motion to adjourn.
motion second.
Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor, show by sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. The motion passes. The meeting is adjourned.